Thank you all for being here today. We are here today to respond to the deeply concerning and profoundly extreme anti-abortion record of the new Republican Speaker, and to make clear to Speaker Johnson, if he is serious about being a leader and getting things done, he needs to leave the radical anti-abortion crusading at the door, because that kind of extremism is not going to fly with the American people, and it's certainly not going to fly here in the Senate, especially if any of the Democratic women senators you see here today have anything to say about it, and we do. Everyone needs to take Mike Johnson seriously and take him at his word, because the comments he has made about abortion are truly as radical as it gets. Comparing abortion to the Holocaust, suggesting that abortion is responsible for school shootings. The American people absolutely should be alarmed, because there is cause for alarm. This is the highest-ranking Republican in government. This is the man Republicans just unanimously elected to be the Speaker of the House. This is someone who fervently, with all of his heart, wants to force women to stay pregnant even when they do not want to be, and he wants to use the force of law to make that a reality in all 50 states. Because let's be clear, it's not just what Speaker Johnson has said about abortion, although his words are frightening. It's what he's done as a member of Congress, and before that, a lawyer for the very group responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade, which, by the way, is the same group working right now to overturn FDA approval of mifepristone, which Speaker Johnson supports. As a member of Congress, Speaker Johnson has supported multiple pieces of legislation that would ban abortion nationwide and criminalize providers, including a bill that would ban abortion after 6 weeks before many women even know they are pregnant. And if that wasn't extreme enough, he's also backed a so-called personhood bill that would not only criminalize abortion, but ban certain forms of birth control, ban stem cell research, and ban IVF care, which many couples rely on to start a family. It doesn't get more extreme than that. So here's our message to Speaker Johnson and to the American people. Senate Democrats are going to continue to be a firewall against any new Republican attempts to restrict access to abortion. That means absolutely no new anti-abortion laws, restrictions, or riders will fly here in the Senate. Absolutely not. My colleagues know I'm someone who does want to make sure Congress can actually work. I want to solve problems, help people, and I will work across the aisle to do that. But I will never stand down when it comes to protecting reproductive freedom. Hear us when we all say abortion rights are not a side issue for us. They are not just something we'd like to have. This is a fundamental right that we will not budge on. We'll do absolutely everything we can to protect every woman's right to an abortion. Speaker Johnson can listen to that message now, or he can learn it the hard way. It's up to him. But I hope he understands that the only way to get things done in divided government is to work in a bipartisan way. And that means putting aside extreme tactics and partisan policy writers when it comes to abortion or any other issue, so we can responsibly fund the government and tackle the other pressing challenges our nation is facing. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Murray, for bringing us all together. It's really wonderful to be here with my colleagues. And first thing I would just say is amen to everything that Senator Murray said. For 50 years, Roe v. Wade protected our freedom to make our own health care decisions. And then it was gone. And now young people today have fewer rights than their mothers and even their grandmothers had. But if you think Republicans are going to stop there, you haven't been listening to them. Now, as has been said, we have a new Republican Speaker of the House, leader of the Republican Party, and Speaker Mike Johnson is determined to lead his caucus and our country a lot farther back than 50 years. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, Speaker Johnson said, quote, "Many of us have been working towards this day our entire lives, and it is a joyous occasion." Now, next on his agenda, banning abortion nationwide. He said doctors who provide abortion should be thrown in prison, sentenced to hard labor. And he even thinks reproductive freedom, not easy access to guns, leads to tragic shootings like the one in Maine. And you better believe that he wants to come for your birth control too. He sponsored legislation to declare that life begins at the moment of fertilization, which could make many methods of birth control and fertility treatments illegal. Speaker Mike Johnson wants to be in your doctor's office, your medicine cabinet, and your bedroom. Democrats have a better idea. We think you should make your own decisions about your health care, your life, and your future. Senator Baldwin.
So good morning. I am really pleased to stand with so many of my colleagues to reaffirm our unwavering support for a woman's right to control her own body, her own future, and her own family. Just like everyone here, I was closely watching House Republicans take their time picking a new speaker, not only because we are less than 3 weeks away from our government funding legislation expiring, but also because of the extreme views expressed by some of the candidates who threw their hats into the ring. Speaker Mike Johnson is no exception. He has a well-documented history of opposing gay marriage, calling them, quote, counterfeit legal arrangements, end quote, pushed by, quote, radical homosexual advocacy groups, close quote. He has a track record of bullying LGBTQ plus youth, introducing a bill to mimic Florida's Don't Say Gay law. And of course, Speaker Johnson has a laundry list of ways he has tried to oppose a woman's right to choose. While I'm always committed to working with anyone to deliver for Wisconsin and our nation, I think it's equally important that we stand up for the rights and freedoms of all Americans. Today, I'm proud to stand up for a woman's right to choose, to make her own decisions about her health, about her body, and her future. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, Wisconsinites were sent back to the 19th century, when our 1849, and I did not misspeak, 1849 abortion ban went back into effect as a consequence of the Dobbs decision. For over a year, I've heard harrowing stories about how banning abortion care in Wisconsin endangered the lives of so many in my home state. One woman experiencing a miscarriage was left to bleed out for days before she was offered care. Another, whose water broke at 17 weeks, had to wait till her fever was up to 101 before she could get the care she needed. I heard from a grieving woman and her husband grieving the loss of an unviable pregnancy, but instead of being able to grieve that loss, they had to sort out the logistics of an out-of-state trip to access abortion care. I heard from doctors who left the state of Wisconsin to practice somewhere where they could provide comprehensive care for their patients without fear of prosecution. Now, while Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin has restored access to abortion at 3 clinics in Wisconsin just recently, we know that reproductive health care remains under attack. And just look at the new speaker's record. I stand here today to say in no uncertain terms, every American deserves the freedom to make their own health care decisions without interference from politicians. And the American people overwhelmingly agree. They have said time and again that they don't want politicians butting in to their personal health care decisions. We're here today to make clear to Speaker Johnson that advancing any legislation that seeks to further restrict access to abortion will not see the light of day in the Senate. We have a lot to get done by the end of the year, and I hope House Republicans will join us in focusing on delivering for the American people, not further restricting the rights and freedoms of women. Senator Hirono.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm proud to stand here with my colleagues to make sure that abortion rights remains as a right throughout our country, even though over 26 states have either eliminated the right to abortion or have severely limited our access to abortion. If you were to add up the number of years that those of us standing here have been advocates and fighters for abortion rights, I'd say that it probably would total over 200 years, because I have been fighting for abortion rights for at least 40 years. Think of it. So here we are, after weeks of impasse as the House Republicans went through some of their more well-known radical extremists, they finally settled on the least known radical, anti-abortion, MAGA extremist in their midst. His name is Mike Johnson. And as mentioned, he was an attorney for an anti-abortion legal organization long before he got elected. And he has accused women of using abortion as a form of birth control, blamed abortion for school shootings, and referred to abortion as a Holocaust. And he said banning abortion would funnel, quote, able-bodied workers into our workforce, thereby strengthening Medicare and Social Security. That's like the basic tenet of chattel slavery, where slaves just have babies. This is the Speaker of the House. His track record speaks for itself, and I was astounded. In his first speech as Speaker, he said, God ordained us to be here. So separation of church and state out the window with this guy. So he is as radical as they come. And of course, it's not just that he is against a woman's right, our right to make decisions about our own bodies, but he goes after the LGBTQ plus community, and you name a minority group, and probably he's taken some kind of a position against it. So he is obsessed with banning abortion nationwide, and we stand here to make sure that that does not happen. We remain vigilant, and I think it is our job to not only point out some of his more extremist, astounding, scratch your head kind of statements about abortion, but just about everything else, including that God ordained us to be here, ordained him to be the Speaker so he can push forth his radical MAGA ideology on the rest of us. And we stand here to make sure, no. And I see the press here. I think it's really important for you guys to continue to shine a light on his radical MAGA views, because that's who the Republicans chose, even the so-called moderate Republicans who, as far as I'm concerned, have absolutely no spine. Okay, well, Maggie.
Well, thank you, Senator Hirono, for really important advocacy on behalf of women's reproductive freedom. And thank you, Senator Murray, for your leadership and for bringing us together today. And I'm really proud to stand with my colleagues here and join them in this effort. A woman's fundamental freedom is under attack in the United States of America. At stake is not only access to critical health care, but the very principle that women are full and equal citizens in our democracy, and that they should be able to chart their own futures. Women are capable, morally and intellectually, of making reproductive decisions, and they are far more capable of making these personal and often complex decisions than the government is. Across the country, individual women are grappling with the very personal impacts of last year's Supreme Court decision. You've heard some of these stories from my colleagues today, and they are grappling in ways that often jeopardize their health and sometimes their very lives. Anti-choice extremists, including here in Congress, are clear about what their position is. The new Speaker has time and again supported legislation that would ban abortion and would jail doctors for providing care to their patients. focus on that for a minute, would put doctors in jail for providing health care to their patients. The good news is that American people have been just as clear as Speaker Johnson has been. The American people are steadfast in their support for a woman's right to control her own destiny and her own reproductive health. In New Hampshire, the live free or die state, we take our freedoms very seriously, just as all Americans do. And I've been inspired by all of the women and men all across the country who are speaking up for their freedoms and who notably have voted to protect reproductive rights. Standing here with my colleagues, I hope the message to the new Speaker, on behalf of the women of this country and on behalf of liberty-loving people everywhere, is very, very clear. We are committed to standing up for a woman's fundamental freedom and rejecting anti-choice extremism. In the world's greatest democracy, we cannot allow half of our population to be treated as second-class citizens. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Smith.
Well, thank you and good morning. Thank you so much to my colleagues for laying out just how extreme Speaker Mike Johnson is. You know, in my years of working on women's health care at Planned Parenthood and then as a policymaker at the state of Minnesota and now in the Senate, I've seen a lot of guys like Mike Johnson. They seem really nice, right? But these men, Mike Johnson is hell-bent to control the decisions that women make about their own bodies and their own lives. And with people like Speaker Johnson, controlling decisions about abortion is part of it, but it's not all of it. And we can see what he will do if given the chance because he has told us. Speaker Johnson has co-sponsored multiple bills to ban abortion, bills that would criminalize abortion, ban stem cell research, ban reproductive health care like IVF, and common forms of birth control. Speaker Johnson is an extremist on women's health, far removed from what most Americans believe, including Republican and independent voters who believe that women, not politicians like Mike Johnson, should be trusted to make their own decisions about their own health care, including abortion. So I want to ask you to think carefully about two things. The first is this. Remember that every single Republican in the U.S. House of Representatives voted for this extremist to be their leader. Every single one. After weeks of chaos, the one person that the entire Republican conference united behind is this guy who would criminalize abortion, would ban abortion nationwide before most women even know they're pregnant, ban birth control, a man who literally said that abortion can be linked to school shootings. And so with their vote to make Mike Johnson the Speaker, House Republicans showed us that they cannot be trusted to protect our fundamental freedoms. So here's the second thing. I suspect that over the next few weeks and months that we will see Speaker Johnson and the Republican members of the House who put him in that job will try to kind of walk back some of their radical positions. They'll say, oh, I don't really remember saying that. They will obfuscate. They know they're doing this because they know that denying people the right to decide for themselves about their own health care is deeply unpopular with Americans. So they're going to try to convince us, don't worry, that's not what we meant, that's not what we will do, that's not who we are. But here's the thing. To that we say, we know when people show us who they are, we believe them. When they say they want to ban abortion, they mean it. And so if you live in Michigan or Wisconsin or Montana or Ohio or in my home state of Minnesota, where you voted to protect reproductive rights, understand that Speaker Mike Johnson does not care about that, and given the chance, he will take your rights too. So I'm here today with my Senate colleagues to say that we won't stand for it. Senate Democrats stand strong for protecting reproductive rights and fighting against national bans on abortion and contraception and other reproductive health care. We stand strong. Thank you very much. And now we welcome Senator LaFonza Butler.
Good morning. My colleagues have stated ever so clearly the position of the women of the Democratic caucus in the Senate and of the broader caucus and the consistent leadership that has been brought on behalf of women in this country in our position on reproductive freedom, maintaining and protecting that for women and families all across the country. I am honored to be joining this caucus, to be serving under the leadership of Senator Patty Murray and so many of the Senate Democratic women who have welcomed me into this body. I won't repeat all of the points that have been made about Speaker Mike Johnson. He has, as has already been stated, told us exactly who he is. He has shown us exactly what he believes. The one note that I would offer in speaking directly to Speaker Johnson is that on behalf of the millions of women in California, the Senate Democratic caucus, and black women all over this country, hear us very clearly. Not on our watch. Not on our watch will you criminalize healthcare workers for doing their job and advising women of the difficult decisions that they have facing them. Not on our watch will you punish healthcare workers, doctors, physicians who are simply trying to ensure that women are getting the care that they need safely. Not on our watch will a next generation of women, young families, have fewer rights than the generations before them. I have a 9-year-old daughter. And on the day of the Dobbs decision, it became very clear to me that that little girl that I had just dropped off to go to summer camp was going to come home less free than when I dropped her off. And so, Speaker Johnson, not on our watch will my daughter or America's daughters be less free. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to our leader, Senator Patty Murray.
Thank you. Thank you to all of my colleagues and Senator Butler. Delighted you are part of our caucus. With that, happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Senator Murray, you made very clear that nothing that should pass the House infringing on reproductive freedom would go anywhere in the Senate. But given the stakes of what you all just laid out, is it incumbent on the Senate? Should the Senate pass legislation of its own? Should you try again to pass more protections for women, if for no other reason than to shine a spotlight on an issue that Republicans, as you all have stated, tried to kind of obfuscate on?
Look, what I've been very clear about is when it comes to our spending bills, we have to pass them in a bipartisan way and make sure they are funded. Are there things that I would love to have? Absolutely. They are not going to happen with the current makeup of the Senate and the House. So our job is to focus on the funding, to make sure we're doing that, getting our job done in terms of the supplemental requests, the appropriation bills, all of those things that we need to do. That's our message to the new Speaker Johnson. Don't mess with this because it will not pass the Senate. Yes.
So, but, thank you, Senator Murray. What is the plan, though? Because by my count, I've looked at all the appropriations bills. Over half of them have anti-abortion measures in these the House's.
Those will not pass the Senate.
So will you just negotiate with
Those will not only not pass the Senate, because we're going to stand here, we are the firewall, to make sure that they don't, but in the agreement that I didn't sign, but the Speaker and President Biden signed, it said there will be no poison pills in these appropriation bills. So they shouldn't even pass the House. That was a handshake and a vote. Yes.
Given that, are you at all concerned that the government could be headed toward a shutdown if the House insists on including some of these abortion matters?
I am doing everything I can, along with all of my colleagues, Republican and Democrat, to do our job, to be the adults in the room, to get our appropriations bills passed, government funded, because we do not want chaos, and we want our constituents across the country to know where their funding is so they can live their lives in a non-chaotic way. I urge the House Republicans under Speaker Johnson to do the same. I'm willing to work with him on that. Yes.
I know that you all are working on the federal level to block any abortion bans or any anti-abortion policy that comes over from the House, but there's some pretty important state elections coming up this month. I'm curious what your message is to women and voters across the country about making their voice heard in these statewide elections while you all are doing your work at the federal level.
Let me remind you, since Roe v. Wade was overturned, in every state, in every place where women's rights were on the line, voters turned out and women's voices won, and those protections remained in place or were overturned if they were fighting to make sure that their state had correct placement in their Senate. Michigan's, she left, is a good example. And I will say to women across the country and to men as well who turned out and vote, you make your voices heard, and we will keep our rights protected. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.